Chapter 28. Patria, 609 ab urbe condita, 145 BC. The crescent new moon hung in a soft blue sky. Its light speckled the ground through the bare branches of the beeches and oaks. Leaving the road, Paulus had given a low whistle. Now he whistled again so the hound could find him. Niger came bounding through the trees, bursting with pleasure and excitement. He wound through his master's legs, hackles raised, baring his teeth in welcome. Paulus made much of him, fussing his ears, talking gentle nonsense. There was little time to spare. When the alarm was raised at the jail, his own farm was the obvious place to look. Signalling Niger to follow silently, Paulus went through the belt of trees and into the farmyard. Always secure a line of retreat. The army had taught him that. The Achaeans had paid a high price at the Isthmus for ignoring the lesson. Paulus went straight to the stables. It was dark inside, but Paulus could have moved around them blindfold. He took down 2 riding saddles. The mules were sleepy and docile, although, true to their reputation, one took a deep breath as he fastened its girth. Paulus kicked it in the stomach, not hard, but enough to make it exhale. He cinched the straps tight, then hung some lengths of rope, along with the provisions Anirus had provided, from the saddles. He made sure the bag containing the potion concocted by Kaido was not touching those that held the food. When meddling in such things, you could not take too much care. Leaving the saddled mules standing in their stalls, he went across to the hay barn. With a pitchfork, he shifted aside the hay, then got a spade and started digging. It took no great time to unearth the 2 swords. He had wrapped them in oilcloth, and they did not look too spotted with rust. He scooped up a handful of the hidden coins. It seemed profligate not to rebury the others, but there was no time. Anyway, if his plan failed, he would only need a single coin, wedged between his teeth, to pay the ferryman across the Styx. Paulus collected his old army entrenching tool from the store shed, then led the mules out as quietly as he could. If the noise carried to his mother and her maid in the house, the silence of Niger might reassure them. He stood for a moment, debating which way to go. The road was more exposed, but the track at the rear of the farm slower. He swung up onto the lead mule, turning its head towards the tree line and the road beyond. Paulus told Niger to stay. Looking back, he saw the black dog watching him go. Fidubius himself now lived in his townhouse in Temessa. It was close to the council house and the baths, the other amenities of civilized life, altogether comfortable for an affluent old age. His rural estates stretched along the valley of the Sabutus, with outlying holdings north towards Clampetia and south in the direction of Terina, as well as sheepfolds and pastures far to the east in the high Silla. But the main villa was several miles upriver, near the bridge at Ad Fluvium Sabutum. It had been Alcimus's childhood home, and Paulus knew it intimately. The villa consisted of a central building with wings added. Its layout was like the house of the murdered Marcellus, except on a grander scale. Servants, all homebred slaves, lived in the main house to keep it in constant readiness on the off chance that Fidubius should decide on an unannounced visit. The domicile of the owner was separated from the farm buildings and the quarters of the agricultural slaves by a low wall, and the whole complex was surrounded by a somewhat taller perimeter wall. The house of the bailiff stood between the working farm and the villa, from where both could be overseen. It was set in the corner between the outer and internal walls, and 2 further walls created a separate small interior compound. Paulus approached from the west, through the olive groves that grew almost up to the boundary. They were behind with their autumn work. New trenches had not yet been dug around all the trees. About 100 paces out, after taking what he needed from the saddle packs, he tethered the mules, leaving them enough rope to graze. At the edge of the trees, he stopped and listened. There was nothing to hear. Looking at the new moon, he estimated it was just gone midnight. Everyone should be asleep. He secured the coils of rope across his shoulders, and one of the swords, the entrenching tool, and the bag of meat, all in his belt. Stepping out of the shade into the blue moonlight, he felt very exposed, although at this hour he was reasonably sure that there would be no one to see him. There was a wicket gate, but it would be bolted from the inside. At the foot of the outer wall, he halted again and strained his ears to catch any suspicious sound. Again there was nothing. The wall was about 8 feet high, designed to keep out wolves from the forest, not a determined man. The top was smooth, not set with broken shards of glass. It would be a foolhardy thief that broke into the Villa Rustica of Fidubius. Paulus took a firm grip on the coping stones and hauled himself up. Lying along the top, he studied the bailiff's house and its courtyard. Nothing moved in the cold light. The sentinels were out of sight. Paulus gave a low bark, like that of a rutting deer. It was the wrong season, but the bailiff should be sleeping, and anyway, was not bred in the countryside. The hounds appeared from around the house. The 2 huge black mastiffs wore collars spiked with nails. There was no need to make another noise. They had scented his presence. They padded towards where Paulus lay. Hackles raised, fangs and eyes very white in the half-light, they silently stalked this unexpected prey that sounded like a deer but smelt like a man. If he descended into their territory, they would pounce and tear into bits, baying for blood. They would wake the entire farm. Paulus threw the first 2 chunks of meat at their feet. Beasts like these were always kept hungry to increase their natural savagery. Neither hesitated, but gobbled down the food in 1 or 2 gulps. Paulus tossed down the rest of the meat, and they fell on it. The mastiffs settled on their haunches, but remained alert. No gift of food would win them over. They were still intent on ripping this intruder limb from limb. Just let him set foot in their domain. A man can outweight a dog. Suppressing the desire to cough, Paulus stayed very still and looked over at the house. It was right a bailiff should have something of his own. It made him more loyal. Paulus remembered from his childhood Fidubius up at the villa holding forth on the duties of a bailiff. He must be the first out of bed, and the last to go to bed, must see the farmstead is closed, that each one is asleep in his proper place, that the stock are bedded down and have fodder. He must be sober and honest and hard-working. He must withhold his hands from the goods of others and turn his face from wrongdoing. The bailiff should be given a female slave as a mate to make him steadier and more attached to the farm. The litany of desiderata had gone on and on. Presumably it had been intended for the education of Alcimus, but Fidubius had not adhered to his own injunctions. One of the mastiffs gave a low, unhappy whimper. It got up, turned round, then curled up in distress. The other looked over, ears pricked. Either in sympathy or sensing weakness, it too got up and began to sniff its kennel-mate. Then it became unsteady on its legs and fell to the ground, as if felled by a slingshot. Both hounds were still. Paulus dropped off the wall. Drawing his sword, he moved to the stricken animals. They did not move. Cautiously he prodded them with the flat of the blade. Their flanks were moving, but they did not react. Not knowing what was in Kaido's potion, he had no idea of the strength of the drugs he had put in the meat. It might be enough to kill them, but they might come round before he was gone. They were guard dogs doing their duty, but there was no room for pity or sentimentality. Legionaries also died doing their duty. Such was life. Paulus cut both their throats. Both front and rear doors of the house would be locked and bolted. The kitchen window was the place. It had shutters, but no bars or glass. Paulus slid the sword back through his belt and took out the entrenching tool. Inserting the tip in the join of the wooden boards, he paused and let his memory trace his projected journey through the house. Through the kitchen, across the main room, up the stairs, where the door of the bedchamber was to the right on the landing. When he was young, he and Alcimus had played in the house with the children of the then bailiff. The layout would not have changed. From breaking open the shutters to reaching the bedroom would be the work of a few moments. With luck, too few for a sleeping man to wake and gather his senses. No point in waiting. Paulus put all his weight behind the tool. The shutters cracked, all too loud in the quiet night, and sprung open. Entrenching tool in hand, Paulus vaulted the sill. He stumbled over an unseen stool, kicked it away and set off. Racing up the stairs, he heard something. Reaching the landing, he wrenched open the bedroom door. The chamber was lit by a tiny lamp and smelt of sex and perfume, spikenard and cinnamon. Croton was out of bed, barefoot, tugging on a tunic. Hades, there was another figure in the bed. For a burly man, Croton was quick. The bailiff snatched up a sword, a guilty conscience sleeps with a weapon, and lunged. Paulus parried with the entrenching tool. The bigger man used his weight to smash Paulus back against the wall. No chance to draw his own blade. Croton's left hand had him by the throat. Paulus managed to seize the slave's sword hand. Croton's hand was like a vice. The fingers closed, crushing Paulus's windpipe. He could not breathe. He tried to bring his knee up into Croton's crotch. The big man half-turned. "You are a hard little bastard to kill." Croton's breath was hot and stank of stale wine. The fingers tightened. Panic rose in Paulus like a tide of bile. "But you're finished now." Sparks of light were flaring in Paulus's darkening vision. He could feel his own grip on his opponent's sword arm weakening. Slipping towards unconsciousness, he made one last effort. Paulus stamped down with a boot. The heel landed on Croton's unprotected toes. The slave roared with pain. The grip on Paulus's throat slackened. He twisted free and retreated towards the far corner. Croton went to follow, but stopped, limping badly. "Zeno, stab him in the back!" So that was who was in the bed. Paulus should have known. "Move and I'll kill you too!" Paulus's shout came out as a croak. His eyes did not leave Croton as he shifted the entrenching tool to his left hand and drew his sword with his right. "Him too?" Croton mocked. "You're finished, civic crown and all, soldier boy." It was all bravado. Paulus was a trained swordsman. Croton was not. But Paulus wanted him alive. Before Paulus could decide what to do, Croton lunged. Paulus blocked the blow with his blade. The heavier man dropped his shoulder, intending to hammer Paulus against a wall again. This time Paulus was ready. He sidestepped. The force of the attack drove Croton past, put him off balance. Paulus left a leg trailing and tripped his assailant. It was an old wrestling move from his youth. As Croton went down, Paulus hit him on the head with the entrenching tool. Not a clean blow. Croton was on his hands and knees, but still moving, pushing himself up. Paulus brought the solid implement down hard on the back of the slave's head with a sickening thump. This time Croton did not move. Paulus swung round on Zeno. The youth was cowering among the sheets, clutching them as if they offered protection. "Turn over. Face down, arms and legs spread," Paulus said. The youth did as he was told. His naked buttocks were white and smooth and rounded, like those of a girl or a statue of a hermaphrodite. "Please, don't hurt me." "Just don't move." Paulus took the lamp and crouched by Croton. Blood was oozing, matting his hair. A lump was already swelling on the back of his head. Paulus felt behind his ear. There was a pulse. A big brute like Croton probably had a thick skull. Putting sword and entrenching tool back in his belt, Paulus took the rope from around his shoulders. He went to turn Croton over. The man weighed a ton. When Croton was on his back, Paulus bound his hands. Paulus wanted Croton alive, but now he was unconscious. "Zeno, come here and help me lift him." "Can I get dressed?" "I'm not concerned about your modesty." Taking one armpit each, together they dragged Croton down the stairs. It was hard work. There was no possibility they could manhandle his dead weight through the kitchen window. "Where does he keep the keys?" "By the bed." This was all taking time. Paulus marched Zeno back upstairs, collected the key and went down again. The back door of the house unlocked. They hauled Croton to the wicket gate in the outer wall. Its bolts screeched noisily. Thank the gods the house of the bailiff stood alone. Even so, Paulus made Zeno hurry to get his captive to the olive grove where the mules waited. Slinging Croton face down over the second mule was the most difficult maneuver of all. Eventually it was achieved, and Paulus tied the bailiff's dangling hands and feet together under the animal's belly. Despite the exertion, Zeno was shivering. It was not a cold night for November, but cold enough. What to do with the youth? If he raised the alarm, Paulus would be hunted down within the hour. Zeno was innocent of everything, except the weakness that made him a victim of men like Roscius and now Croton. Paulus did not want to have to kill him. Taken along, he would be an encumbrance. There were only 2 mules. He would slow them down. Some of Kaido's potion was left, yet given too little, Zeno might come round almost at once, and too much might kill him anyway. Paulus did not want to have to kill him.